Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Gina Kirby with Progressive Parenting Network. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is a very important broadcast for me as we are going to be talking about birthing rights. A Florida hospital, Bayfront Health in Port Charlotte, has threatened in writing to force a pregnant patient, Jennifer Goodall, to have cesarean surgery with or without her consent, and to report her to child welfare authorities for exercising her right to medical decision-making. The threats were made in a July 10th, 2014 letter from the Chief Financial Officer of Bayfront Health Port Charlotte to Jennifer Goodall, a Cape Coral, Florida mother of 3 who was nearly 39 weeks pregnant. The letter informed her that because she decided to have a trial of labor before agreeing to cesarean surgery, her prenatal care providers intended to report her to the Department of Children and Family Services, seek a court order to perform surgery, and to perform cesarean surgery on her with or without her consent if she came to the hospital. I'll let that sink in for a second. And while we're all taking that in, I want to introduce my first guest tonight, Kristen Pascucci. She is a member of the Progressive Parenting Network and more, and I'm actually going to let her introduce herself while I get this little baby who's squirming around situated. Thank you for joining us, Kristen.
Hi.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm the Vice President of ImprovingBirth.org and the founder of Birth Monopoly. And I also am a partner with Human Rights in Childbirth in the U.S.
Fantastic. So I'm hoping
I
you can get...
I love watching you multitask.
I'm getting it down. I'm getting back in the swing of things. It's been 5 years, but I think I can do it. So this kind of sounds insane to some people who are don't live in the birth world like I do. If this is the first time people are watching this program, I'm a doula. I'm a childbirth educator, and I'm not. This isn't new to me. This kind of news, hearing about women's rights not being respected, and that's a nice way to put it. But like lay people, like my friends, when I posted this on Facebook, people who are not in the birth world are like, that can't be real. Like, is that real? Like,
I think
really?
that's part of the problem with all of this stuff is that it is so unbelievable that people really can't wrap their brains around how egregious these violations are. And the thing is, with this case, this is, like you're saying, this is not unheard of. And this happens to be a cesarean, so it's a little bit more cut and dried. We hear about these total violations every single day, up to and including cesarean surgery. So this is just sort of like, the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about people other than the woman giving birth deciding what's going to be done to her body.
Right, and that's the thing, is that it's not new. And in fact, this whole thing that we're talking about, this turned into a campaign, and the hashtag is, if people want to find out more, be able to follow it more, Jenniferisnotalone. And it became a huge thing in just a matter of hours because it's not a new thing. And it was tons of women who are who jumped in right away to become a part of it because something like that had happened to them, or they had a friend who had something like that happen to them, and the numbers increased really quickly because of that. In fact, Don Thompson, the founder of ImprovingBirth.org, posted a picture of this woman with tears in her eyes. It was really hard to read the first time. I'm going to try to do it without crying. And she wrote on her little placard, because everybody had like a piece of paper that they wrote their story on, whatever they needed to say, and then hashtag break the silence and hashtag Jennifer is not alone. So she wrote, when my plans for an HBAC failed, the hospital treated me like a criminal. I was ignored, yelled at, verbally abused, denied pain medication, neglected, separated from my husband, held down, strapped to a table, and told that my baby and I would most likely die. Then I was put to sleep. Strangers witnessed my baby's first breath. We were not surrounded by love in that operating room. I suffer from PTSD. Hashtag break the silence, Southeastern Washington.
Yeah.
That happened in our country. People think stuff like that happens in other countries.
Well, so the interesting thing is that this, I just found out about Jennifer yesterday morning, and Improving Birth we had just launched our Break the Silence campaign, like, I don't know if it was not even a week before that, where we said, look, it's time to start talking about these stories, because we just get them all the time. They're just constantly reported to us, and there's no, like, it's all, you know, it's like they're invisible. Like, nobody knows what to do about them. The women don't know how to complain. They don't know if they have a right to complain. They talk to their friends, and their friends say, like, oh yeah, something like that sort of happened to me. It sucked. I didn't like it. You know, I went to a different hospital the next time because I didn't really like that. And there's just nobody's like defining it for what it is. You know, everybody's sort of like, it just seems like it's rolled into this whole like ball of like, yeah, that's what childbirth is. It kind of sucks, and you know, some providers are better than others. Right. That's not really what it is. I mean, we're talking about actual violations of legal and human rights and professional and ethical standards. We're talking about things that I would charge someone for. I would file charges against someone for assault in some of these cases if this was me. So anyway, so we just started this Break the Silence campaign, which we briefly considered calling it the No Means No campaign. And then we were like, no, let's just get people talking about their stories, like just talking. That's the most important thing, is to sort of identify and label what's going on and take the shame and the embarrassment out of it, and just say, this is not acceptable. So anyway, it was kind of interesting that this whole thing with Jennifer happened at the same time. I think there was a lot of like dissatisfaction going around already, where people were seeing these signs and these stories from other women, and they were going, ugh, this is really bad. And then the story about Jennifer hit, with or without your consent, the letter said.
That's I think the most disturbing thing, because like one of the memes that I read on Facebook compared that with or without her consent to like rape language, doing something to a woman whether she wants it done to her or not. That's pretty heavy, violent stuff. And to think that this is coming from a care provider saying with or without your consent seems very oxymoronic. Is that right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense for me. Like, the dissonance is too much. I don't understand. And what other medicine, like if we're talking about like heart specialists, or we're talking about any other field of medicine, what other field of medicine do they say that to people?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. In fact, I think a nurse, I wish I had this in front of me, a nurse messaged me or something within the last couple months, and she said something like, you know, I've worked in a hospital, and it's just so unique, like when you're on the labor and delivery floor, those patients are treated unlike any other patients in the hospital. You don't treat patients like that in any other department.
Yeah, like where else? I'm just trying to think of any other time where you would be told those kinds of things, like that woman was told that her and a baby would most likely die, or talked down to. Like, when do you hear about heart patients being talked down to? Or somebody who's going in for an appendectomy being treated like garbage, you know? Like, they really talked down to me when I got my appendectomy. You don't really hear about it.
Well, I think you hear about sort of like condescension and arrogance, but it's not force. You know what I mean? And it's not like you better do this or else, you know?
Right.
Which is what you get in maternity care.
But it's downplayed so much. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who, you know, folks who are against home birth, who have their blogs, and they'll say things like, oh, you know, these home birth people talk bad about the hospital and say these, you know, bad things are happening, or that doctors behave this way, and that's nonsense. Even Jennifer Margulis is in her book, The Business of Baby, when they did a review of it, the gal who did the review from the New York Times.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, totally decried what she said, saying that, oh, that doesn't really happen. Like, doctors don't
I
really
think
talk
it's
to
so
people.
interesting because I see that. I do see that reaction from some people, and it just strikes me as so funny because I think, well, you don't actually study this, and you don't know what you're talking about. So what they really need to be saying is, I have a really hard time believing that. Oh my goodness. Maybe that's true, and maybe that's not true. But apparently there's some research I need to do, or there's some digging that I need to do because some people are telling me that this is what happens. So rather than sort of dismissing it out of hand as that doesn't sound like something I want to believe, I think it's a little more, I think it's more prudent to actually look into it before you make statements like that. And that's part of the reason for the Break the Silence campaign, so that we can document this stuff, so we can actually point to it and say, no, these are dozens of people saying the same things. We're not making this up.
There's thousands of people, really. I think once you guys, once this gets going and it catches some ground, you're going to hear a lot more stories where people feel like they can actually say their story, where they can talk about it, where they feel like they might be believed. Because these might be women who have shared their stories with some people, and they're like, that can't be true. Like their friends, their own friends and family that might say, oh, that sounds exaggerated, or that can't be right. And I think you're right. It's a lot of it is just them thinking it's cognitive dissonance, because we need to believe that our healthcare providers care about us and have our best interests at heart, because if they don't, it's going to throw off so many other beliefs that we have. That cognitive dissonance is there, because how can a healthcare provider say or do these kinds of things? And when it happens to somebody else, you're kind of like, well, that she probably exaggerated it, because you need to say that in your head because you don't want to believe that that could happen to you, because
Yeah.
that's terrifying.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, I think it's really important that on both sides that nobody's lumping all care providers together. I mean, in fact, I think that's sort of one of the problems here is that on either side, people lump all caregivers together. So you either have the people who say, like, they're all bad and they're all in it for the money and they don't care about you. And then you have the other people who say, they're all looking out for you. They went to school for this, and they're going to do what's in your best interest, and you just need to trust them. And neither of those statements is true.
Yeah.
And there's just this, there's a lot of gray in there, and there's a lot of variation. And you know what that means? That means that we have to use our own judgment, and we actually have to use some discernment when we choose the people who we're going to trust as our care providers. So you can't automatically trust or automatically distrust someone, which kind of puts it back in our laps, which, I know that probably a lot of people don't want to deal with that responsibility.
Well, yeah, that's got to be a whole other show too, about taking responsibility for your own birth. That's a whole other one. But I do want to talk about Jennifer for a moment. We do know that she did have her baby, and we know a little bit more about that. Can you share what we know so far?
I'm only going to share a little tiny bit because she really would like some privacy.
I bet.
Yeah. But she did have her baby. She went into labor, and then she chose to go in for a cesarean at a different hospital. And that's the whole story. That's exactly what she wanted, was just to be able to go into labor and then to choose whether or not a cesarean was necessary and wanted. And she decided it was, and she had one. So, I mean, that's as good an outcome as you could possibly hope for.
Well, I mean, that's what this whole thing is about. It's just not being given the opportunity, not being given the chance, or just being told what they want to do. I tell people, you know, I think people think because I'm a doula that I'm all about the baby coming out of the vagina, like that's my big deal, and that's not it. I don't care where it comes out of, to be honest, and I think maybe there's a percentage of doulas out there that would be like, oh, but for me, that's not it. For me, it's how is my client being treated? Is she being treated with dignity and respect? Is she getting informed consent? Is she and her partner, are they making the decisions at every turn? Are they being given the information that they need to be able to make the decisions that are right for them and their family at every turn? That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Well, I mean, it's
not asking for a lot, but
is it your birth or is it her birth? I mean, you know, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in the end, she did get to have what she wanted, but there's people out there, like women out there, who don't get what the big deal is. I mean, like the dissenting opinion is, and I'm quoting somebody from Facebook who said that she wasn't forced. She didn't have to go to that hospital. If her uterus would have burst and she bled out and lost her life and her baby's life, would all of you still be demonstrating tomorrow? Have you seen her medical records? Have you seen her ultrasounds? Have you any real medical information to make your educated medical?
Let me just stop you right there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because this isn't about Jennifer, guys. This is every woman in America, all right? When a hospital gets to tell a woman how she's going to give birth, that's every woman in America. Well, I'm sorry, 99%.
Right?
99% of women who give birth at hospitals. You know, when you let something like this slide, you're in a really scary, slippery slope. And you know, when I said earlier that this was the tip of the iceberg, that's really true. This is not the first time a hospital has said you're going to have a cesarean with or without your consent. It's not. We hear about this stuff all the time. So it's not just about Jennifer. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it just doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant. If you have a problem with Jennifer choosing a trial of labor after 3 cesareans, how about you let me come up with 50 women in Florida today who've only had 1 cesarean and are great candidates for VBACs and are going to be forced into cesareans.
Yeah, what about that with Florida? I had heard, is it like some kind of rumor or something that you like have to pay money to be able to have a trial of labor or something insane like that? That's got to be a rumor.
You know, Florida, yeah, I think Florida's a funny state, I think, in a lot of ways. I can say that because I lived there very briefly and got to see it firsthand, and holy crap. But you know, that is only one of 3 states where we've actually heard of where women have to pay a vaginal birth fee in order to even have a chance at avoiding surgery if they've had a cesarean before. So that's where they actually pay like an upfront cash fee to a provider in order to not be scheduled for a cesarean, to like be able to go into labor.
Okay, see?
Yeah.
I find that very hard to believe. I don't think you're not telling the truth. I just have a really hard time believing.
I know it sounds insane, but think about this.
What?
If there is nobody in your area who will support a VBAC, you know, when your market is so constrained, this is the kind of stuff that, you know, springs up. It's like fungus, you know. These are the kinds of crazy dysfunctional things that can happen when you have a totally constrained market where the women don't have any options, they don't have any rights. It's not an option for them to just show up and decline surgery. It's just not. It might be, you know, legally they might have that right, but in reality, it doesn't happen. So anyway, so then you have sort of the added bonus of throwing on whether or not someone has the ability to pay for the privilege of using their own vagina, which some people are not able to do that. In fact, just like within the last, I don't know, like 4 or 5 months, we heard we had somebody down there trying to collect money for a young woman who was an immigrant and didn't have a lot of money and was needing to come up with a vaginal birth fee in order to get out of her cesarean. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was like a ransom. We're like, wow, how are we going to help this woman come up with $1,500 for her, to avoid this cut on her abdomen?
That's insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I think, again, like you were saying, it's not about Jennifer, but I think it's hard for some women to get behind this for the same reason, like the last time we talked, it had come up that it's hard for a lot of midwives to get behind other midwives when they're charged with something outrageous like murder, because they need to distance themselves from that person. It's like a safety reaction to distance yourself from her. I'm not her. This is happening to her because she wants something crazy. It's this reasoning that allows for us to like maintain our sanity, or maybe sometimes to keep us from thinking too hard, which might drive us crazy because the reality is kind of scary and ugly. But I don't know. I really think that's what it is. I don't think that women say the things that they're saying because they're mean or ugly or anything. I really think that they're saying those things because it's too hard to wrap your mind around, especially if it's something that you're just not used to seeing, and it's too much. You're like, not me. That happened to her because she must be crazy, or she must be wanting something. We don't know the whole story. It's too easy to say something like that when in reality they are all
on, or that it could ever happen to you. You don't.
Or someone you love. And it's not, because some of the people who are commenting are probably not going to have another baby ever, and so that doesn't relate to them, but they are going to know someone down the road and love this person who might be in that exact same instance. And sometimes it takes that for people to get out of that mindset, get out of that way of thinking.
Yeah.
So how do people, let's say I am expecting and I am seeing this story, and I am on my third birth. I had 2 of them in the hospital, and I want a VBAC. How do I like traverse these waters? How do I go about trying to have a baby on my terms? What do I need to be looking out for? I think I might be hinting at where do I buy your book, but there's that.
Where do you buy my book? So are you asking me, like, with choosing a provider? Is that where you're going with this?
No, I'm asking you like 8 million questions with this, because what should moms be asking their care provider? How do they know that they didn't just sign on with this care provider who says that they're all about VBAC, like this hospital does? This particular hospital says they're all about VBAC. So how do I know that my specific care provider isn't just blowing smoke up my butt, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think it's a good idea to do some research. There are people out there who work with pregnant women and VBAC women for a living, and are really good at sort of at identifying this stuff. And really the most straightforward thing is to find out your doctor's track record. And you do that by contacting your local ICANN, your local Improving Birth group, asking, finding some doulas, and maybe some other birth professionals, childbirth educators, midwives, whatever, and really doing your homework on the provider first. I think there's a lot. I think Jen Camel of VBAC Facts actually has a really good article on her website about interviewing your care provider. And I think people really need to be aggressive about doing that. You've got to really nail it down. It's not something you can just sort of like skate by on, or wing, or hope, or pray, or cross your fingers and think, well, he seems nice and he seems supportive. you've got to really make sure that the person is supportive. And I know that's really hard to do if this is your first time ever dealing with this. But like I said, there's some good information online about it. Primarily I would say VBAC Facts. That's a great article. And then asking that question in some of those forums, in some of those VBAC forums, I think is a really good idea, because you can get feedback from people who have walked this walk with many, many women before and can say, oh, that's sort of a classic right there, what you just heard. Or they could say, that's a legitimate concern. That's probably something you should talk to your doctor about. And, maybe you should do a little bit more research about that. But
yeah,
it is.
I want to just throw out there for somebody who is watching to know, you're not getting medical advice from these forums. You're just finding out a little bit more about people's.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. I'm sorry. About interviewing your provider and what to ask, and sort of. I'm just talking about gauging the supportiveness of your provider. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
So, for example, if your provider says, oh yeah, I'm totally supportive of VBAC. As long as you go into labor by 40 weeks and the baby isn't measuring too big when we have an ultrasound at 38 weeks, and as long as you haven't gained X number of pounds, and there aren't any other complications whatsoever, then yeah, I'm totally supportive of your VBAC. And I always place epidurals just in case. So you are going to have an epidural and monitoring.
Okay.
So so when I hear stuff like that, we know, okay, well, those are several things that are not based on any evidence whatsoever. There are sort of classic signs of the bait and switch that's coming down the line, that when you get to 38 or 39 weeks, these things, the signs are not going to be in your favor. And they've already cut your chances in half by saying that you need to go into labor by 40 weeks with no medical basis for that recommendation whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I'm used to hearing. Shannon, let's see. Shannon joined us in the chat. She says you never know, and in many cases the VBAC 2C scenario makes you even more vulnerable because of bait and switch, and that's what they're calling it, by the way. That's like the vernacular with in the birth world when you hear about doctors that support VBAC and then turns out they don't. They kind of do the bait and switch. So yeah, if you ever see that anywhere, that's what that means. Oh my goodness, this just makes my head spin, because this is a real thing that just happened, but it's not just because and I heard this too, by the way. Like, here's another thing that we're not talking about, where you're talking about breaking the silence. There are women out there who have this happen to them and they don't even know it because they don't speak the language. Like, English is not their first language, okay? So I'm talking about things I've heard of, witnessed firsthand by friends who work in L&D. I have a number of them who have told me all kinds of horror stories about women who don't speak the language, who are essentially just set up for a C-section because it's too difficult to go through an entire labor with them and get a translator and do all of this stuff. It's more trouble than it's worth, and it's just so much easier if things, if she doesn't come in right away, like her baby's ready to come out, if she comes in super early labor, they just set her up for a C-section and that's it.
Yeah, I've spoken with a few doulas who do who support women for whom English is not a first language or might not be a language at all, and yeah, they say having a translator there makes a total difference in how the woman is treated and how her birth goes, like in a physiological medical way, which is really sad and scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very sad and scary, and their post-care is really sad too, but that's a whole other topic. But yeah, I mean, think of all the thousands and thousands and thousands of women that has happened to, where there will be no silence to be broken on there because they really don't even understand what happened. I mean, my friend was saying, this woman that she came in on, she kind of saw what happened to her. She saw her go into the C-section, and she was off for a few days, came back, and the woman was still on the floor. And she, not on the ground, but on the floor of the hospital. But there was still like vomit from where she had thrown up in her bed, still there, like caked on and old. She just wasn't given like really great care. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that she just didn't speak English. And she was sweet. She's like, she was really grateful to me when I changed her linen. She said, thank you so many times. And she was just really grateful for her care and didn't even know that she was being treated in a way that a lot of people who were in a different situation than herself, that maybe could speak English or could take on some type of retaliatory action, and she wasn't treated in a nice way at all. So you have a whole other piece of this pie, right? If we're talking about everybody breaking the silence, where a big chunk of them, it's not going to happen because they don't even know. Or if they do know, there's no way for them to voice it.
To express it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we might be blowing away a couple of people tonight just by sharing this in the first place. I think, it's just the immenseness, the enormity of it is so huge. So I was looking for something to write on a card for hashtag Jenniferisnotalone. And I was trying to think of something. I've never had a C-section. I've never been in this situation. I had a baby once in the hospital. Once. I'm on my 4th child. I didn't want to do that again, so that's my own personal choice. But so I was trying to think of something to say, and I couldn't think of anything. And I thought, what would I say? What would I say? And so I did what I always do when I'm talking, if I'm going to be talking to doctors or about doctors or to hospitals or about them, which is use ACOG's language and quote what ACOG says. And all I had to do was go to, or you could Google maternal decision-making, ethics, and the law, and ACOG. And it's under the ACOG committee opinion. And what you find is that what this hospital did goes completely against ACOG and everything they say about coercive and punitive legal approaches.
I can think of 3 ethics opinions by their committees off the top of my head that this doesn't jive with. Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah,
and numerous articles by doctors. One-off articles about ethics on these types of issues. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, according to the ones that I found, coercive and punitive legal approaches to pregnant women who refuse medical advice fail to recognize that all competent adults are entitled to informed consent and bodily integrity. Hey, hello. It's kind of
really wonderful ethics opinions.
Right. So okay, if I'm a consumer again in the future, I don't think I will be again. Who knows? I didn't think I was going to be the last 2 times. If I am a consumer, and I'm hearing this, so let's make this plain. ACOG is not like, they don't set up laws that doctors have to abide by, right? These are all guidelines.
They're a professional organization. They're a self-regulating profession. But the stuff that ACOG puts out really carries a lot of weight. It is not legally binding, but it certainly can carry some legal weight because it's what people will refer to in law. If there's a lawsuit or something, they'll look to ACOG to speak to the guideline or the standard of care on something. So in that sense, it is important. And of course, it's important because these are presumably the guidelines that we can expect obstetricians and gynecologists to follow. Although, we know that's not the case in a lot of times.
Okay. So I'm reading through the chat room on the YouTube page, and our friend in Florida shared that coercion is not uncommon in the case of the Hispanic, Mexican / Spanish-speaking public here in Florida. Yeah, that's so rough. So a lot of women think their care is just their care, like that's the kind of care they get. This is the hardest thing I think for birth, when you were talking about things that you should do to get ready for your birth. I think weddings kind of set us up for thinking that like we plan our birth like a wedding. You know, you just kind of go through a catalog and you register at Babies R Us, and that, you know, you take your class at the hospital, and that's all you need to do. But it really isn't that way. I don't think that a lot of women even want to hear that they're going to have to do a lot more work than they did to plan a wedding. When you're planning your birth, you really need to do your homework. You need to do some investigating.
Well, this is sort of like a dirty little secret. You know, it's not something that people want to talk about. You know, when a new client calls a doula and says, "Will you support me in my birth, and what do I need to know?" You know, you don't want to tell a pregnant woman, "Oh, honey, are you in for it?" You know what I mean? I mean, nobody wants to say that, and you know, and you know, it wouldn't necessarily be a professional thing to do anyway. But yeah, that's the thing that women have to understand. We're not making this stuff up. The system is not set up in your favor. The odds are not in your favor. When you look at the numbers, just the sheer numbers of, you know, the practices, the procedures that go on, we know that the vast majority of women are having procedures and experiencing, you know, birth practices that are not evidence-based. And you would think that if those women were given a choice about those things and full information about those things, they wouldn't be picking the option that is statistically more harmful to them and their babies, right?
No, absolutely. If they were given full and complete informed consent. On my first birth, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I took the hospital course, so I got a course that was skewed towards the way they do things at the hospital, so I wasn't told a number of things. And when I was offered Pitocin, when I wasn't even in labor, I went into the hospital because I had lost my mucus plug and I had some spotting, so I thought something was terribly wrong. Yeah. I went into the hospital and they said, "You're going to have your baby today." And I said, "I am?" And they said, "Yes, you are. We're just going to give you some Pitocin to get things going," and blah, blah, blah. And so I asked, I did ask, is this harmful to me or my baby? And she said, "Oh, honey, everybody gets it." So that was the extent of my
that's not an answer.
Right? And so I felt really stupid. And, you know, you're kind of
why would you ever question that? You know what I mean? Like, and that's the problem, is that women don't know. They just don't know. I mean, in a lot of ways, Gina, it's like going to a used car dealership and saying, "Okay, so here are my needs and here's my budget. What can you do?" And then taking the first thing they recommend to you.
Right. I mean, I didn't really know. If she would have said, you know, here's the pros, you know, we can get your birth started, and here's the cons, and really listed off all of the things that could possibly happen to me and my baby if I decided to go ahead and go forth with them putting this oxytocin or synthetic oxytocin in my body. No, if I'd have known all of those things, I would have said, you know, I'm going to pass. Can I just go into labor on my own? I think I would have been smart enough. I don't know. I still question myself because I said Pitocin, potassium, it's probably something good for me anyway. No joke. And I used to feel really stupid about that, but I don't anymore because it turns out I'm not the only person who ever thought that. So, for new moms, it sucks because there's so much to know. It's the birth of your baby, and why wouldn't you want to know it? I thought I did enough. I thought going to the hospital for my birthing classes was enough. And I sat in the front row and I took a million notes, and I thought I asked a lot of questions.
Well, I think the problem is that, women, there's a big difference between childbirth education and being educated about childbirth in the hospital. There's childbirth, and then there's childbirth in the hospital. And they're two very different things, right?
Yes.
You can't just be educated about childbirth. It's like you've also got to be educated about how they're going to want you to do your childbirth and make some decisions about, if that's the way you want to go, and if it's not the way you want to go, how you're going to handle that, how you're going to prepare for it, how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, and here's the thing, too. I'd like to say, and unfortunately it's like 40 minutes into our talk. I probably should have said this earlier. I'm not out to vilify hospitals and doctors. That's not my main goal. I really think, I was talking to my husband, Craig, about this earlier. I was saying, I really wish that it was less about the vilification, because it's not all doctors and all hospitals. It really isn't. I've been a doula at some births that were amazing, where the entire staff was on board with her having a normal birth and went out of their way to give her everything she wanted. That can happen.
But there's so much defensiveness about it. It's like, if I made up a number and said 1/3, and I'm totally making this up, 1/3 of doctors in hospitals are, bad, right? Or like are bad, unacceptable, they don't do the right thing, whatever. In some people's minds, that it's like unforgivable to even talk about the fact that there are some bad ones out there. And to me, I look at that as a birthing woman, and I think, good Lord, I want to know that there's a 1 in 3 chance that I'm going to get a bad hospital or provider. But there's so much defensiveness about it. It's like you say, oh my goodness, there are problems out there, and people say, don't talk about the problems. Don't talk about it. You're trying to say that 3 out of 3 doctors and hospitals are bad, and that's not the case. Talking about the reality of maternity care is talking about the reality of maternity care. That's it. No more and no less.
That's just from me to you. but to get to the end of that, what I was telling Craig was, like, if only we could sit everybody down and teach these moms about the culture of the hospital and the culture of doctors and what it takes to become a doctor, and the mindset that happens to you where you go from a normal civilian and you become a doctor. Their mindset is so different, and if only we could embrace it and understand it. That's fine. Do what you need to do. If only we could embrace it and understand it in that way, I think we could get through a lot of our issues, because it's not about the vilification of them. I think it's just that we have to get all of us on the same page. And I think until we understand the culture of the hospital and the culture of doctors, then that's the only way that we're going to make a difference. Make statements. Some people, and they're having a hard time to get on. And so I'm hoping that they'll make some of their statements here on a message with me, and then I can share that here. Someone said in the chat room that ACOG's guidelines are set up to put the protection of the obstetrician above the rights of women to evidence-based care. Well, I didn't say it, but Dr. Marsden Wagner, may he rest in peace, did say in an interview with me that the ACOG is more like the union for obstetricians. That was Marsden Wagner. Yes, very frustrating. I really do wish I could get more people on here. Okay, so I know that we had I think something came up in chat. Yep. All right. We might have to say goodbye to Kristen. Do you need to go? Oh, you're still on mute. Yeah.
I think I'll give it a try. We'll see how this goes.
Well, we could wrap it up. I mean, let's do that, because babies and mama time come first for me. So, I can't have served on the board of directors for Attachment Parenting International for 5 years and let you let your baby cry and talk to me. Okay, so
he's okay. He woke up and he was confused, and then he just peed on me when I picked him up.
Oh, Henry, my goodness. Okay, well, we'll let you go. Okay, how can people find you, and how can people find out more information? So I'm a mom, I'm sitting here, and I'm like going, oh my gosh, I didn't know any of this stuff. Where can they go to get more information? What are all the links they can find you at?
Well, go to Birth Monopoly, the website, and the Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/birthmonopoly. And I'm actually doing a class for parents it's called Stand on Your Rights, Demystifying Legal Rights in Childbirth. So we'll talk about what our rights are, the basis for our rights, and then what our rights really kind of look like how they're really treated in the real world. And we'll talk about how to prepare and how to plan, and some tactics and some strategies for asserting your rights when you're in the hospital in a way that's collaborative and kind of keeps everybody on the same team and makes it a win-win for everybody.
Awesome. Oh, and what's the name of your book?
Vaginal Birth Bans in America, The Insanity of Mandatory Surgery, is an ebook that I wrote about VBAC bans, because I think they are the craziest thing on the planet, and I still sometimes get that feeling of I don't know, just that surreal feeling when I think about the fact that they exist, which was my first thought when the first time someone ever told me that there was such a thing as a VBAC ban, and I thought it was a joke. And then I realized it was very much it wasn't a joke at all. It was something, something that affects tens of thousands of women around the country every year. So, yeah. So I wrote a little book about it.
Awesome. I'll let everybody know where they can find it. Thank you for all that you do, Kristen. Thank you for your work with Birth Monopoly and with ImprovingBirth.org, and for just being an all-around awesome lady. I'm glad I know you. Thank you so much.
You too, Gina.
Okay, so everybody, stick with me here. I know Kristen has to go. Or you can kind of stay on and pop on at the end if you want to, and mute yourself, do what you want, girl. But I do want to mention that Shannon had said, well, go ahead and put it on mute and then come back in whenever you want. Shannon had said it's not that it's us against them, it's that them refuses to accept that us has a say in this. I love that. That's fantastic. Okay, well, I can understand that for sure. And someone said Canada does this too, not just the U.S. Someone else also said in our chat room that it is a trade union, speaking of ACOG, for sure. Let's see. Oh, we're talking about ACOG, and they do not self-regulate per the normal route. Individual medical boards for specific states do, and community SSC overrides ACOG every time. Okay. Well, I want to thank the ladies in our chat room. If there isn't any other questions or any other comments that you want to make, the history of birth within... Oh, whoa. Chat room just blew up. The history of birth within the system is that pregnancy is a disease and birth is an emergency. Doctors aren't trained in normal birth. How do we expect them not to view it as pathological? That's, again, getting back to what I was saying about the culture of doctors and hospitals. It's their culture that says that birth is an emergency waiting to happen, that it's a medical issue. If you guys have it, I really do recommend, where is it at? Born in the USA by Dr. Marsden Wagner, How a Broken Maternity System Must Be Fixed to Put Women and Children First. And I really think that it should just be a class in and of itself. In his book, he talks about tribal obstetrics, which I think is awesome, which totally gets into the culture of doctors and hospitals. And again, for me anyway, it's not about villainizing, the vilification of them. For me, I really think it's, for me, it's important to get in touch with where they're coming from, because Dr. Wagner says, he starts off the chapter like this, no joke. While lecturing to a room full of doctors, I will sometimes say, I remember the first time I killed a patient. The hostility in the room is immediate and palpable. I have committed treason. And he goes on to talk about how they are like ingrained from school all the way up to make sure that they are infallible. They need to be. It's like, it's so important for them to maintain that in the work that they do, or it would be really, really difficult to do the work that they're doing. And so there's a way that they maintain that, and it's through this culture, and it's through hazing, and it's through like they wear costumes. It's like a tribe, you know. If you're just starting out, you wear certain clothes, and if you've been there forever and you're the head of everything, then you have a certain outfit and a hat and things that you wear. And when it's broken down in that way, it makes so much sense. You start to understand their way of thinking, and I think it's really important for this is just a whole other show too, for doulas to understand that if you're going to be working in there, you're going to be helping women, if you're going to be advocating for women, not necessarily during the birth, but ahead of time, it's really good to be able to speak their language and know where they're coming from. If you're going to go and dedicate the rest of your life to living in Africa or Spain or anywhere to do birth work, you're probably going to want to learn the language, right? So wouldn't it make sense that you would want to learn the language and the culture of the place that you're going to be spending time in, if indeed hospitals is where you're helping women? That's my 2 cents. I highly recommend that you read this book, especially the chapter on tribal obstetrics. It's really amazing. I love Dr. Marston Wagner, even though he's left us. Long live Dr. Marston Wagner. Good stuff. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned to more episodes from Progressive Parenting Network. We hope to bring you up-to-date information on things that are happening. If you know about things that are happening and you see that I am not up to date, please let me know by contacting me at progressiveparentingradio@gmail.com. Also, you can get a hold of me through our Facebook page, Progressive Parenting Network, and you can also get Kristen Piscucci's book on the ban against VBACs at progressiveparentingnetwork.com. And you can also find a lot of courses there and just some really great information that I think can help you and your clients if you are a doula watching or if you're a mom. This can really help you to help make decisions by going to progressiveparentingnetwork.com. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to check the chat room one more time to see if anybody else says anything. Oh, Shannon says, VBAC bans affect every woman out there who is birthing because it implies that hospitals are in charge of our births. Indeed, wonderful point. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. We'll see you again next time.